Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are crime dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the Blacklist series finale. Great series finale. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I think what's so interesting about this finale is that it is quiet. It's not like some bombastic, action-y like finale, like, oh, it's action-y for like first chunk and then like the last chunk is quiet. It's like, it's a quiet finale all the way through of like, there's still stuff happening, thriller elements of, because you're not sure how everything's going to play out, but it is, I think I'd use the word subtle, but it is subtle and it is quiet and it is beautiful in its own way. So, obviously picking up in the aftermath of last episode, Red took Denbei to get treated, and in fact, he ended up giving his blood to Denbei, even though it's like, the doctor was like, I wouldn't recommend it because, I mean, obviously we have protocols set up for this because giving a direct, like, transfusion like this, we don't know what your condition is. Like, yeah, you might be able to give the blood, but we have no idea what kind of effect it's going to have on you, which maybe, like, we never really covered it. We know, once again, we knew Red was sick before, but we don't know if, like, Red was kind of on, like, I was already kind of on death's door anyway, and as the episode kind of talks about, it's like I was already embracing death's door, so I'm fine with whatever's coming, so I'm ready to face it head on. You know, all that matters to him in this moment is making sure that Denbei is okay. And so it is this situation. At the same time that's all going down, like, Nixon is confronting Wrestler about everything. It's like, hey, you, like, oh, like, the fact is, you got bruised a little bit, but Arthur is dead. I bet you set this whole thing up. It's like, no, like, Reddington did all this. Like, he's like, oh, that's why you decided to go alone, because you guys knew what was going to happen. It's like, well, no, like, I mean, I guess maybe that was why and the argument could be made, like, why did Reddington shoot Wrestler? It's either like, hey, to sell the story of, like, hey, and to make it seem like it wasn't just like a easy getaway, I'm going to make it some resistance, but also he knows what Wrestler would have done. Wrestler would have arrested him even in that moment, would have tried to get Denbei help, but it's like, right, I'm going to be able to help him faster than you, so I need you out of my way, so, but it's also like, with what the wounds, there's no way they would have believed the story, like, because Arthur got straight up killed, whereas Wrestler didn't. It's like, right, you got some cracked ribs and stuff, but it's at the end of the day, you're still perfectly fine, which just makes it more suspicious. To be fair, like, Nixon lost his buddy, and it's like, he was a good man. But luckily the dude was there, like I said, who, like, it's like, no. Denbei tried to de-escalate the situation. Arthur panicked, pulled the trigger. That's what ended up happening. So he ended up believing the guy, but it's like, yeah, cause he was like, I would have no reason to lie. Like, the fact of the matter, cause he was like, Nixon was like, Arthur, he's the only one that had the guts to pull the gun. It's like, first and foremost, he's not a trained agent. He's a congressman. Good man or not, he's a congressman. He had no business pulling that weapon because he wasn't supposed to be there in that capacity anyway, but he was just so dogged about the truth. I mean, even later on, like, Wrestler was like, yeah, I had my issues with the man, but at the end of the day, that's the thing. He was on the right side of things, and that's the thing. Reddington is the criminal. Once again, it's that thing of, if this was any other series, you'd be like, nah, get him. But it's because this is Reddington. We have followed Reddington for 10 years. We've fallen in love with this, like, charismatic bad guy, but we can all recognize he's a bad guy. I'm not like, oh my God, he's a complex character, but I also recognize, I wouldn't even put him as an anti-hero. He's a bad guy with some good guy tendencies. That's kind of how I would look at it, but I would never label him even like an anti-hero. I'd put him as like I'm a bad guy. He recognizes he's a bad guy. He revels in being a bad guy because being a bad guy is what kept his daughter safe for so many years. And then, it allowed him to do what he had to do for these past 30 years. So it is that situation of, it is this, I mean, there's a lot of catch-22 going on in this episode with just everything. So, luckily later on it turns out like Denbei's 100% okay. He's recovering. But, now it's up to them to try and track down Reddington, especially when Herbie and Sia over here wait, Nixon made it perfectly clear. He's like, oh, I'm going to put him down like the animal he is. It's like, you're a government worker. You shouldn't be saying that so blatantly. Part of me was like, is he trying to say that so publicly because he doesn't care who hears it. He wants them to know because he's so blinded by his rage. Or I was almost wondering like if he wanted Sia and Herbie to hear that, because he's like, if they hear that, then it'll be a situation where they'll try and contact them and we got them all. Because his plan is still like, I'm not like, much like they were worried about with Arthur, especially after Arthur's death, like Nixon's going to be like, no, I'm going to take down Reddington and the rest of this team because I know you're all in cahoots with him. And it's like, the sad thing is, yes, he was right in some capacities, but not right in others. Even Harold's like, right, we were his accomplices for a very long time. So it's not like Arthur was wrong, but it's just like I said, his dogged pursuit of the truth. It's like, things are so blatantly black and white, but you lose those shades of gray, which Reddington falls in some very, very, very dark shades of gray, but still. But Herbie ends up leaving because he's like, right, I can't be a part of something that, like, because I know we'll get to Reddington first is what Sia's saying, because it's like, right, we won't let Nixon do that, but it's like, no, like, he made it perfectly clear, like, can I really be a part of hunting down Reddington, like, helping out with the Dembe thing is one thing, but hunting down Reddington, my wife and my daughter love him, like, can I really be a part of something like that? And even, he quits, because for him, it's like, I love working here, but I love Red more, and the fact is, like, are we on the right side? And even Sia, like, questions that. It's just like, for her, it's like, after this is all said and done, I think she is going to go back to MI6, because we don't know when it's all said and done what will happen to this task force. It probably will be shut down. Everyone would probably end up going their separate ways. Like, there's no continuing this. This would be the end of everything. And jumping ahead a little bit, honestly, you probably would have Sia going back to MI6 because this whole task force thing would be gone, and Wrestler would probably get transferred to a lot of those people probably get transferred to another unit type of situation, another task force of sorts maybe. But, even had Cooper and Nixon go face toe to toe, because it's like, right, you're threatening to kill Reddington. He's like, fine, you do that. Yes, I will have to pay for my crimes, and so will Reddington. But if you cross that line, so will you. I will bring the full force of everything I can to make sure that because that is how it works. Yes, you might be out for revenge or what happened. This ain't about Arthur. This ain't even about Reddington. This is about you and me and our principles. You want to fight for this system. Yes, you want to take down Reddington, and we'll find you'll take me down too, because I am at the forefront of all this. So let me take the lumps for my crime. But if you try to do anything to Reddington, if you do anything to Reddington, you will pay the consequences for that as well. So that led to the back and forth of him calling him an old man, because it's like, oh, you're like so out of your depth. You're like, get out of the way, old man. Like, it's almost like old man screaming the clouds is kind of how, like, Nixon's kind of belittling Cooper. So him and Sia went to Red's place and they're examining it, but everything's kind of going, and just for them, it's just, the place feels so empty, because it's not even just the things. Without Reddington's presence, the place just, he took up so much space with just who he was, his aura, his essence, and it's like, without him here, it's like, this place feels so barren and so empty. It feels weird to see it so barren and empty, especially all the time, like, Sia's spitting here around Reddington too, so recently, it feels so void of life without him. And so obviously Nixon showed up being like, well, I'm not going to take your word on it. I'm going to have my people search around and find out if there's actually anything missing or not. It's like, fine, put all that work in that you want to. So, but I love the reveal of finding out where Reddington actually is. And it all comes full circle where Sia finally clicks. She's like, the bullhead and everything. She's like, I was thinking like nothing was missing. It's like, yes, that. Like the story he told her a couple episodes back, it's all coming full circle. One of the last things he's going to do, because he's not really in the peak condition, because like I said, I think Reddington was already dying. Like maybe there was already some pre-diagnosed thing, and then giving his blood to Dembe just weakened his condition. But because he did seem like he was already on death's door, I think well before now. And that's why he was okay with Liz killing him in season 8. But then it never happened, and he lived another, 3-4 years. And it's just like, I guess for him, it was like, I was always living on borrowed time. And I just got out of the game and then finally got dragged back in. Got out of the game, got dragged back in one more time. Just when you think you're out, they pull you back in. But yeah, Reddington's trying to return the bullhead to where it's supposed to, like the matador that died, like trying to return it to like his home, I think, in what was it, in Spain. I was like, that's beautiful, like to make that story come full circle like that. And I think it was kind of I mean, especially how intertwined so much of Reddington's story has been around that, not just this season, but in just his entire existence, about like kind of like, you know, willing to risk death because that life has always kind of been that, almost like if you're not willing to take those risks in life, like, you know, it's like life has to be kind of about those risks, even if it causes you death in the end, you know? So that's where Red is, and Red grocery shopping, going for a walk, you know? Like I said, just like this quietness with this finale, and especially when you get to the later half of the episode, like Nixon's not involved anymore because it's not taking place stateside. Eventually, Donald goes to Spain to try and track him down, and it feels very poetic. And he goes to the place Red is actually staying at. But I love that it's like while he's talking to Dembe and Harold, like Red calls on the other line, like, Dembe, you're good. I'm just happy you're alive, my friend. Like, next time you get shot, taking one in the arm or the leg, you know, the neck is pretty dangerous. And especially when he said that line to Dembe, like, no, I was thinking of a story. I'll call you back. I'll remind you about it later. It's like, especially because he made such a point, like a couple episodes back, remember him being like, oh yeah, Dembe, like, we should spend more time together. He knew the end was coming. Like, he was burning his entire organization, his operation to the ground. But also, like, he probably knew, like, his time was up. And I think it's almost poetic and beautiful in his own right that he kind of already said his goodbyes to some extent, but he's never been, like, the proper farewell. I mean, he's kind of said his goodbyes to everyone else around him, but, like, those who are, like, work for him and his loyalty, but even, like, the task force, he never had, like, I mean, I guess arguably, like, his goodbye to Harold and to the task force was when he said goodbye in episode 20, you know? So I guess, like, that was kind of his, like, general goodbye to everybody. He didn't even give, like, Dembe, like, a proper goodbye. It's not like he knew for sure they died. Like, he was hoping that they'd get to talk one more time, but sadly they didn't. But I love when Wrestler came there to look for him, and it's like, oh, he's not here. And the lady's like, yeah, he's not here. And then later on, Red's like, oh, when was he here? Like, oh, like 10 minutes ago. FBI agent, what was it, like, no humor but great hair or something? It's like, huh. And it's like, what will you do with yourself, Donald, if you ever do catch your man? And so I thought the point was, like, obviously the point is to deliver, like, the bull's skull, but I didn't know, he didn't take it with him, so I don't know if it's a thing of, I'm going to go for a little walk, I'm going to come back and then deliver, or was I my thought was, like, he was like, oh, this is where, well, yeah, because he had asked her previously, and she's like, oh, you're up early. He's like, yeah, I'm going to go for a walk on the hills. So he was going to come back and probably deliver the skull himself, but never ended up getting a chance to. Like I said, it's just, once again, like, Wrestler being on his trail of, like, oh, I'm right here. Ended up finding out, wait, he was there, but there's a back house that I only went into the main house. There's actually a back house that's further down is where he was staying, and knows for sure that Reddington was there because he sees the bull skull. So at the same time, you had that conversation between Dembe and Harold. He's not going to get, Dembe isn't going to be prosecuted, but at the end of the day, he can no longer be an FBI agent. But he's like, no, it's okay. Like, he's like, as I was laying there, because I legitimately thought I was going to die, I have been in front of and behind a gun for too many times. And I think for me, I think it's time for me to walk away from a situation like that. This was kind of the perfect opportunity. It kind of put things in perspective. I mean, he's been shot before. He's been left dying before, but it just kind of put things in perspective. I think especially as he's on, like, as the squad is in this situation with Red currently, I think it put things in perspective, especially because obviously his circumstances have always kind of kept him from his daughter, so it is probably a thing of he'll finally be able to kind of spend even more time with his daughter. Like, you know, I mean, Dembe is very, like, well equipped, and because I mean, him, Sia, and Herbie all, like, talked about, like, what are they gonna do post, like, this task force being, you know, dismantled. But he also goes on this beautiful, like, soliloquy about Red, about what Red's kind of taught them, that this is a man, ironically enough, surrounded by death in every shape and form. And what does he do? He embraces life fully. It's all about living life and not being afraid of death. Rage against the dying of the light and not going quietly into that good night. That's what I think. It's so beautiful, and it's like, right, that's a lesson that Red has kind of passed on to each and every one of them, because I think Dembe knows in some shape or form this is probably going to be the end. Either Reddington goes out in a blaze of glory and dies, or what, but it just like feels like this is the end. I didn't even talk about it. I skipped over because I completely forgot for a second, but he didn't get like a full goodbye with Agnes, which I thought was beautiful, where it calls her up and it's like, I was kind of thinking I was going to leave a voicemail, but she's working on a project, and it's like, my friend is kind of busy, they got family, and also this boy, so-and-so told me that he likes me, and it's like, well, he's awkward around you because he's, trying to figure out his feelings, but give him time. The fact of the matter is he'll figure things out, and he'll be able to kind of like, talk to you about, the feelings, like, you guys keep doing what you're doing, keep going, like working as hard as you are, like, go keep crushing it or whatever. And Agnes to say the line of, Pinky, you sound like a mom right now. And to have that pause from Red, it's like, because, he is, Because especially for Katarina, and I think I talked about this earlier in the season, that for Katarina, being around Agnes is her way to make up for the fact that she wasn't in Liz or Masha's life for most of her life. Yeah, you kept tabs. You had Tom kind of there to keep tabs, but you also were in her life in her adulthood, but it still doesn't take away the fact is you were only there for a tiny bit in her childhood. You kind of got a little bit of that back. I mean, you got to play mom and grandma, and the fact is that I would hope, because Cooper and them don't really know. None of them know. I don't know if Dembe knows. I'm sure Dembe does, but eventually, because Dembe definitely knows. So Dembe knows, the rest of the squad doesn't. I think at some point Dembe's probably going to tell Harold, who will tell Agnes who Pinky really was. It's like, that was your grandmother, and that was your mom's mom, maybe. Then I'm like, I feel like she has to know, like, because I kept thinking, like, are we going to get, like, Agnes in the future? But it was like, would she follow in her mom's footsteps? Probably not, especially when you have Reddington being like, no, be something more interesting than a police officer. Pick something more exciting than that. And it's just, like, it wasn't even like a proper goodbye, but Reddington knew the end might be coming. And it was like, I want to talk to you at least one more time. And it's just, like I said, there's this somberness to it. And the fact is he's on his own walking. I'm like, is something going to happen? Like, I was like, I don't expect anyone rolling up on him and shooting him. I was like, is he going to like turn into a gunfight with Wrestler? But no, it's a bull. I was like, it's all coming full circle. In that moment, not running away, just not fighting it, just standing here, looking at the bull, being like, right, the Matador, this must have been what he felt like too. And it's like, this is my end. Not the ending I expected. And I think that was beautiful because even Dembe was like, yeah, this isn't the ending any of us was expecting. It's very meta in that regard. But he was also like, it's not even about the ending. It is about the adventure. And that's what this has been. I say it all the time, but this has been a powerful journey from beginning to end. And I've loved every step of that journey. And for it to end like this, kind of going out a little Walter White-ish, but also not. But once again, just like no fear, accepting death. You don't like to think like on some level, like if there is some afterlife that maybe mother and child would be reunited again. But for Reddington, it's like, no, I'm going to hell for all this stuff I've done. I've done bad. And even Dembe had touched on it, like doing bad, but also doing some good in the world, protecting and fighting for the people that Red cares about. And at the end of the day, it's like, but Red's like, I'm going to go to hell, and I'm okay with that. But maybe taking some solace in knowing, like, hey, my daughter is out there somewhere with her husband, that they're reunited, and that takes some solace of, like, for the first, it's like, right, didn't even get like any more time with each of them, still making plans, like, because that's the thing of like, you can accept, like, I'm not afraid of death, it can come at any moment, but the fact is, doesn't mean you have to put your life on pause and just wait for it. It's like, no, I'm planning ahead, like, if it happens, it happens, but if it doesn't, it doesn't, I'll keep living. But that was always just Reddington's superpower. And for it to end like that, and for Wrestler to be the one to find him, and even like Wrestler picking up his hat and kind of placing it on him, it's like, yeah, Cooper, I found him. And it's like, that's going to be a heartbreaking thing for Cooper, because it's like, right, legitimately, as confusing and complicated as he was, that was probably Cooper's best friend. And for things to play out like this, for Red to meet his end like this, but it's almost like it could be no other way. So, and I think that's beautiful too, to end it that way. Beautiful and heartbreaking and sad, because it's not like, oh, Red died and we got like more after the fact. It's like, no, it ends with Red's death, and like, you know, it's like, once again, what are you going to do with yourself, Donald, once you caught your guy? After all this time, you got Red. I mean, you didn't catch him alive, but he's gone, and you know that he's no longer out there. And let's not forget, Red dismantled his a majority of his organization, at least his information network, and he put it in a situation where none of those people would go working out. So, yes, I've done the evil I've done in this world, and I'm able to do some good with it, but I also made sure no one else would be able to take what I built and monopolize it in other capacities. None of those people are going to potentially go out there and work for anyone else. So, basically, what it dies with me, because I put my major parts of my operation in retirement. But even then, that's not everything. There's still probably going to be things that operate post his death. It's like, it makes you wonder, like, who's going to, like, I mean, there's a lot of on-screen stuff we saw get handled, but who knows, like, you know, what does Chuck do? Does he find new employment? Does he retire? Like, did Red, he'll come up with something like, yeah, if I die, do this, this, and this. Like, there's probably like things that are probably set into play and upon the contingency of his death, because that's going to be worldwide news around, like, both on the like more law enforcement side of things across the world, but also in the criminal world. It's going to be a major shakeup of people trying to fill that void. Granted, he's kind of basically blown up the mine shaft behind him and it's kind of closed it off, so no one else can really at least like dig where he was. It's like, no, that's kind of, you want to do some criminal stuff, you're gonna have to do it on your own. You ain't gonna come and pick the bones of like my carcass. They kind of do what you want. So, but like I said, no aftermath of like, all right, what is the team? You know, sadly we never got another appearance from Aram or Park, you know, in the end. But at the very least, it feels poetic in that, like I said, in a very Breaking Bad-ish fashion for it to kind of end that way. Their game of cat and mouse with him and wrestlers has finally come to an end, especially how interwoven and complicated their dynamic was, and especially how that even got more complicated with Liz. So, like I said, a sad, but there's almost like a beauty to it. Like that message is, like I said, like, just kind of live your life. You know, death is an inevitability, but the thing you focus on are the other things that aren't an inevitability. The kind of the finiteness of life, the things of like, yeah, the things that aren't like a guaranteed aspect of life. Death is always going to be guaranteed one way or another. It's always going to find us sooner or later, but there's other elements of life that aren't like a guaranteed, like it's just being in the right place, fate, destiny of like being able to experience certain things, getting to know certain people to, you know, so I'm curious how most people feel about this being how the show ends, how Reddington's story ends. It's not even like, oh, I went out blaze of glory, like you would expect something like, I would have expected something like that if he didn't get arrested to go out in a blaze of glory, but for him to end like this, like I said, for that bull story to come to an end, to be his, and for him, I'm sure for him, it's like, how very poetic. It's like staring it dead on as it charges towards him, no running from it, just standing his ground and letting this be his end. You know, I'm glad, like, I mean, I'm sure it probably would have messed with the rating if they'd actually showed it, but I'm glad we didn't see it. Still sad we saw the aftermath of it, but it's heartbreaking for this to be the end. And like I said, the task force is done, so everyone's probably going to splinter off. Like I said, Sia might go back to MI6, you know, Herbie's going to be heartbroken by the news, but, you know, maybe him and Dimbe can see each other from time to time, you know, and still be connected, and maybe he can meet up with Harold and Wrestler and just what the aftermath of like this can get your mind going, but it's also, like I said, everyone's going to go their different ways. I mean, like they kind of have been for the past, like they did after season 8, like they did in season 9 technically, so after season 9 too. So it's like, you know, so it is interesting. Because I kept wondering like what would be the future of this task force at the end, but I think it's just like, because I was wondering, like, could the Blacklist end up back with them? But it's like, no, that kind of goes with Reddington to the grave. So, but a lot of the experiences they took from this, anyone that stays on with, whether it be a Cooper, whether it be a wrestler, can still apply a lot of this to tracking down back. Because, you know, and I'm sure it's going to be a complicated thing for a wrestler. Like, right, he had a very, very complicated relationship with Reddington, and for this to be the end, it's like there is this monicum of respect of just kind of like we've done this do-si-do, we've done this rodeo for a while, and for it to end like this, and for your story to end like this. I'm sure he wanted to catch Red alive because he didn't want Red dead, you know. So I didn't even mean that Red Dead, like as in the game Red Dead. Sorry. Didn't even mean that. But yeah. That's kind of all I can really say, though. It's just like, man, that's going to sit with me for a while. I mean, obviously, I just finished the episode about, I'd say about 15 minutes before I started recording. So obviously, it's still just kind of like, still washing over me a little. But either way, it feels so weird for this to be the end, you know? Not just like it's a weird ending, but it's just like, man, it still feels so surreal that the show's over, you know? And, you know, I feel so sad especially because, like, right, like, it got handled off screen, but, like, I'm so bummed we never got, like, the full Blacklist redemption story, like, what that could have spun off on, like, I mean, we got the end result, and we kind of, even though it got all handled off screen, they did conclude that story but we didn't get all the remnants of that completely concluded. There's still remnants of that, just kind of like, oh, we're not going to worry about too much on what the canon is for that. We tied up Scotty's story, making her having one final appearance, and Tom's story closes up with, and his dad's story, like, that all got handled off screen. So, such a bummer that we didn't get to have more of that. But I mean, that's something, because I was just recently thinking about that, just like, man, I'm so bummed that show only got one season, but I mean, and because I mean this is the end, you know. To everyone that's been a part of the show, front of the camera, behind the camera, everyone, thank you for bringing this amazing show to us. Never would I. It's hard to like. It never would have crossed my mind 10 years ago when I first saw the trailers for the show, like, oh, the show seems so interesting, because this is the most time for just, you know, a lot of this, I think this entire cast, this is my first time, like, obviously spending an extended piece of time with them, especially James Spader. I was familiar with James Spader beforehand, but this is a project I've really gotten to, like, really see, like, what gravitas and charisma he brought to a character that is dark, yet also complicated in so many capacities, like a Reddington. And I like a day or two ago, I got like a recommended article, you know, of James Spader saying goodbye to the character, you know, after this. But like I said, like I can't believe thinking about like, right, seeing those first trailers for this show back in 2013. Cause didn't this show like start in like January 2013? So it might even been like 2012 when the trailers potentially dropped for it. But it's like, it's wild to be like, yo, I didn't even think that far ahead of like, oh my God, this show's gonna be around for 10 years. Didn't even cross my mind. And it's wild to think. Like, I remember that image is burned into my head. Red walking into the FBI building, hands behind his back, dropping to his knees, and who would have known that it would have branched out into this massive narrative that it has, the good, the bad, the laughs, the tears that it has, and just, I cannot thank everyone involved, like I said, cast, crew, for everyone's involvement in making this show what it is. It has been a heartfelt, beautiful, thrilling, actiony ride, and I will look back on this so fondly. So, like I said, and like always with this situation, everyone involved in the show, once again, front of the camera, behind the camera, I wish them the best with their future endeavors, whatever they may be. And so I think it's time to kind of bring this to a close. Like always, to the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.